So from there type thing, that was 4 points. I'm gonna have to use a D8 here. That's 4 here, and now we're gonna gain. We have to spend 4 points to gain that 7 ability on our character sheet type thing, and we don't. We don't have to like spend any points on that type thing. In fact, because the 7 is such a low score type thing in that type of sense, they're gonna give us a sympathy 4 points of conversation type thing because we opted not to take a 10 stat or 12 or 14 stat, but to take a 7 stat. They're going to give us 4 points and give us some casino chips type thing for our bad luck type thing in that type of sense. That's sad. And so now you had 20 to begin with type thing in that type of sense, and you're going to add 8 to it. Now you've got 28 to spend type thing in that type of sense for your 7 strength and 7 charisma. We haven't looked up the modifiers yet type thing in that type of sense. Now in that type of thing, we have that type thing in that type of sense. We got 7 strength and 7 charisma, and now we're going to do with the rest of our character type thing. Now we turn back to page 51 type thing in that type of sense, and 55 from there type thing in that type of sense, and we've got wizard and adventurers and characteristics. And yes, for people who are wondering where the familiar was, it's with the sorcerer, even though the wizards are the ones that most likely sometimes to pick up a familiar type thing in that means. So you have to turn backwards, not forwards, but back from 55, take 1 off from 54, take 1 off from 53, take 1 off to go to 52, familiars, and also sorcerer type thing in that type of sense. Don't ask me type thing in that type of sense. That's what occurred. Wait a minute, add 1 to 55, and if you act now type thing, go Billy Mays here type thing with OxyClean. If you add 1 and you go up to 56, you can see arcane spells and armor, and if you add another 1 to it type thing, you can go to page 57 and find school specialization of wizards. So in that type of thing, you've got a sort of late night, not late night assistance, but more midday wincing of some type of explanation type thing. It just, and it's a little bit too it came on a bit strong. Yeah. So in that type of thing, in that type of sense, that's 7 strength and 7 charisma type thing. We'll get to the other part later type thing in that type of sense. Now from that we have index, and I want to throw some other numbers to you and lodge up the sabu in the sabotage. And so in that type of thing, in that type of sense, we're going to go from there in that type of sense, from 55 type thing, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. And that's racist, adventures, characteristics type thing. Let's see here. Does it say there in that type of thing? Characteristic wizard strengthen her spells. Everything else is secondary. She learns new spells as she experiments and grows in experience, and she can also learn them from other wizards. Let's see. Turn that type thing. That was under characteristics type thing. That's races. And we're taking human for an extra character feat. I didn't explain that earlier on. There are other people that do so type thing. And with this, to set up your spell type thing in that type of sense, you can move 20 feet and then cast. Human is base 30 feet, so you can move 30 feet and then cast type thing for free based off of your race type thing in that type of sense. You get an extra 10 feet. But, well, amazing. Right into, okay. Now, in that type of thing, that's weapon and armor proficiency, and that's spells, and I think it says it here, abilities. Now, other classes roll, game rule information on page 56 type thing. Abilities, intelligence determines how powerful a spell a wizard can cast, how many spells she can cast, and how hard those spells are to resist. See spells below. A high dexterity score is helpful for a wizard who typically wears little or no armor because it provides her with a bonus to armor class. A good constitution score gives her a wizard extra hit points, a resource that is otherwise very low on because they're D4, not D10, or the barbarian D12. Now, in that type of thing, where were we type thing? Let's see here at the charge my camera because that was complicated. That's 20 points type thing to spend, which is going to be changed type thing in that type of sense. That's a positive too. So let's go ahead and just write that we set the word positive, and we set the number 2, so that's 2. So that's positive 2 type thing. And now we're going to have 20 hit points type thing in that type of sense. And that's 20. And then we're going to subtract that positive 2 here type thing in that type of sense. And that's a negative and negative. That's negative and positive 2 type thing. The negative overrides the operator of that plus 2. And that's 20 minus 2 type thing in that type of sense. And that's going to be 24. So that's 20 minus 2 type thing. And that's 18. Now in that type of thing, let's try the 7 type thing. The 7 is not a positive number. It is a negative number type thing in that type of sense. And it is 4. And in that type of thing, it's negative 4. And we wrote that. We haven't put it in any operation. We haven't subtracted it from anything. It's not any mathematical operation whatsoever. It's just negative 4. Negative 4. So now we're going to take the 20, we're going to put the 20 in there type thing that day. We're going to subtract this negative 4 type thing from it. So now we're going to subtract negative 4. We're going to subtract negative 4. We are going to subtract negative 4 from 20 type thing in that type of sense. 20 subtracted from a negative 4 type thing. Minus and minus are same sign type thing. That turns into a positive type thing in that type of sense. And in that type thing, that is positive 4 and 20 type thing in that type of sense. Very complicated. Extremely complicated type thing in that type of sense. And it's not complicated type thing, or nor is it really some type of thing there. That's negative type thing in that type of sense, and component Bunsen burner breakdown type thing, and that subtract type thing next to each other type thing in that type of sense. So now, that subtract negative type thing, I'm going to subtract a negative 4. I am going to subtract. Subtract is represented by a minus sign. A negative type thing is represented by a minus sign. That's a minus minus 4 type thing. That's minus and minus become a plus type thing in that type of sense. So you're really, because you took such a bad score, 7's at the top of the scale type thing, which is higher than 18 type thing in that type of sense. A critical success is a 1 type thing in that type of sense. You roll a 1 type thing in that type of sense to get a times 3 multiplier type thing, and that means you roll a 20 type thing in that type of sense to get your times 3 times 2 multiplier type thing, and that means. And so a higher number type thing is 20, not 1. So in that type of thing, that's 20 type thing plus the plus 4 type thing in that type of sense, and now it's going to get even bigger type thing in that type of sense, and it's going to go to 20 plus that, oops, didn't put the positive number in between it type thing in that type of sense with the minus and minus. So it's 20 plus 4 type thing in that type of sense, and that's going to be equal to 18, which is 24 type thing in that type of sense. So now this character has, in that type of thing with the first 7, they've gained 20 plus 4 to spend on the remaining part of their character type thing. Now in that type of thing, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5, that's 6 abilities. We put a 7 score in this ability type thing, and we can still adjust this score type thing in that type of sense. So we put a 7, we put points in there and put a 7 score in there type thing in that type of sense. So this ability is already paid for. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5 slips without any dice in front of them type thing in that type of sense. So we've got 5 abilities left over to pay for type thing in that type of sense. And that's extremely difficult type thing. And there's ways to convolute that and come up with some type of Chester can't answer type thing. And that's clever, but that's not what's going on here type thing in that type of sense. Now we're going to do the same thing to charisma from our thing type thing in that type of sense. That 7 charisma type thing, that's also another 4 added on to it type thing in that type of sense. But I'm going to switch those to red type thing or purple or something, because I think I've got more red ones than green. And in that type of thing, that's here and that's here type thing. Despite being a negative type thing in that type of sense, that's a 4 and that's a 4. Now that can be some color-coded problem type thing in that type of sense, because that looks like 20 minus that type of thing in that type of sense, and just can't conquer the Jacob's ladder of that type thing in that type of sense of going away type thing, and that means, and that's right. Something complicated, really easy. Now that's 4 plus 4 plus 20 type thing. This was a 4 here type thing in that type of sense for strength, and this is a 4 here for charisma. Charisma and strength type thing, that's one piece of paper that says strength, and that's another piece of paper type thing in that type of sense that is of strength type thing and that type of thing. So that's 1 next to strength, and that's 1 next to charisma type thing, and that is 1 and 1 type thing, and that means type thing in that type of sense. That's 2. So now that's 1 and 1. I can't 1 and 1 type thing in that type of sense. That's 2 dice. So with 2 dice type thing in that type of sense, that's 4 gained here and 4 gained here type thing in that type of sense. So that's 8 gained type thing, and still starting with 20 type thing in that type of sense. Now you've got 4 points that you gained here and 4 that you gained there type thing, and that means. Now in that type of thing, that's 4 and that's 4 type thing here, and that's 0 and that's 2 type thing, which could be 44 type thing because they're next to each other. But that's 8 And in that type of thing, that's another great door of mathematical opening type thing in that type of sense. It could be 8 type thing in that type of sense, or they could be divided type thing, or squared or exponential, but they're definitely not 8. So that's 4 plus 4, that's 8 plus 20, that's 28 type thing in that type of sense. Now we've got dexterity, it doesn't have a die in front of it type thing in that type of sense, so it's spent on it. That's constitution, that's intelligence, and wisdom. We spent on 1 on strength and 2 on charisma. That's 1 die and that's 2 die type thing. Spent 2 dice type thing. Now we had 6 abilities type thing in that type of sense. 6 minus the 2 ones that we had type thing. 6 minus 2 type thing in that type of sense. We've got 4 abilities left over. Dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom. So that's 1, and that's 1, and then that's 1 type thing in that type of sense. And in that means type thing, that's also 1 type thing in that type of sense. That's dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom counts as 1 ability type thing because they got 1s associated with them. So in that type of thing, in that type of sense, that's dexterity type thing, that's 1 die. That's constitution, that's 1 die. That's 2. That's intelligence, that's 1 die. That's 3. And that's in wisdom type thing, and that's 1 die. That's 4. So in that type of thing, in that type of sense, that's 4 dice type thing in that type of sense, but that's 1. They all say 1 on them, so that's a 1 ability type thing added in between them type thing in that type of sense of time each other type thing for 1 type thing in that type of sense. That's not the door that we're going through. Those are 4 abilities type thing in that type of sense. 2 off of 6 abilities. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 abilities type thing. So that's 6 abilities minus the 2 that we spent for in strength and charisma. And that's equal to 4 abilities left over. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4 abilities that we have left over. Very complicated. So in that type of thing, now our chart type thing said, let's see here, wisdom in that type of thing was part of one of the abilities, but I think it's profession in the class skill list type thing. But I'm going to disagree with the chart so that I can get the rest of my character in that type of thing. And that's absolutely right. And that is not complicated, but once again, that was made into something complicated type thing here. And in that means that's your normal curve type thing in that type of sense. I don't think I can show that curve in that type of thing in the video, but bam, that's the histogram distribution, and that's the curve on its side type thing in that type of sense. Sometimes you see them that way in a histogram trend line type thing. Not all the time. I mean, that's fairly complicated type thing in that type of sense. And I'm not sure if I've got one here. No, see, I can't do that there either because of that copyright type thing. I'll try to turn one on its side type thing, just like the one here in that type of sense, but that's still complicated. So now that's 7 and 7 type thing. Our profession was in wisdom type thing in that type of sense. We do have an ability based on it, but I want to get a little bit higher dexterity and constitution after intelligence type thing. So I'm going to spin that one type thing and have 7 on it. That's 7, 7, and 7. That's another 4 added to that type thing, and that means. And that is genius type thing on it. Now in that type of thing, that's a gain of 4 type thing, and that means that's 4. 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 4 is 12, plus the original 20 type thing in that type of sense, which there was no 20 type thing to begin with. Now, in that, that's epic high fantasy type thing, 10, 15, 20, plus the 4, 4, and 4 type thing in that type of sense. That's 12 plus 20, that's 32. That's very complicated type thing, and that means. Now in that type of thing, that's a 18 score type thing in that type of sense, and that's here. And that 18 score is going to go in intelligence. Now in that type of thing, an 18 costs 18 points type thing. It costs 17 points type thing. Had 32 points type thing. That's 4 times 3 type thing in that type of sense. And that's 12 plus 20 type thing. That's 32 type thing in that type of sense. Minus the 17 in that type thing. That's 15 remaining. So now we put those there type thing in that type of sense. And this goes over to 1-5 type thing in that type of thing of betterment. So now that spent of the 17 points type thing off the 32 gives us an 18 score that we put in intelligence type thing. Now in that type of thing, the human pathfinder thing type thing in that type of sense plays at 2 in any ability score that you have type thing in that type of sense. And intelligence is not an ability type thing, it's an attribute. Now in that type of thing, you turn back into a PHB, which also still doesn't exist type thing on page 8, and you leave down from the chart type thing, then the abilities type thing in that type of sense, strength, dexterity, that's in blue, constitution is not an ability type thing, and then on the next page underneath constitution is intelligence. That's an ability, and with your human thing, you can place in the string, or you can put +2 in it, type thing in that type of sense, which you can't. And it's the first one. Or dexterity is an ability, but you didn't place it within the string type thing, so your only choice was to leave the 2 in the string type thing, and that's where you have to spend it type thing in that type of sense in your lower ability. And the chart can't go beyond 18 anyway. So that's 2, that's 2, that's 2 type thing, or 2 here. Now if I left 2, 2, and 2, and 2, that would be 8, so I can't do that, but I have to choose. Or 2 in charisma type thing, or 2 in wisdom type thing in that type of sense. But since your character casts through intelligence type thing and not charisma, we might put it in intelligence type thing in that type of sense. So I'm going to put 2 in there type thing in that type of sense, and that's 18 plus 2 type thing in that type of sense, and that's 16 type thing. That's 18 plus 2 type thing in that type of sense, that's 20. 20 does not exist on that Pathfinder chart, but back to page 8, top type thing, that's 14, that's 16, that's an 18, that's a 20 score, and a +5 modifier. Once again, this is very complicated type thing, and that means. And in that type of thing, that's here, and that's a histogram chart type thing in that type of sense, or an Ansoff matrix type thing in that type of thing. Now that's here, in that type of thing, that's a square type thing, and that means here. And from that type of thing, you have the word score, which starts with an S, and the word modifier that starts with an M. And both of those are the exact same letters type thing, and that means. And the points words, which starts with an M2 type thing, which starts with a P. Now, neither the P doesn't go with the S or M type thing in that type of sense. Right now, it does type thing in that type of sense, which it doesn't. That's the first ability type thing. That's the second ability type thing on the S, or points type thing, that type of thing. And that's the third one type thing on the modifier. Points, scores, modifiers, 4, 4, and 4 type thing in that type of sense, or 18 and 4 and things of that nature type thing in that type of sense. Very, very confusing. Now we're still in point generation type thing in that type of sense. You take the M out, you put the S in, and in the chart type thing, it said P type thing in that type of sense. So now in that type of thing, you spent 17 points for the P type thing in that type of sense to generate an 18 score. And that's very complicated type thing in that type of sense. Now that's an 18 score, and the M's not on the chart type thing in that type of sense, but the M is the modifier for 18. You looked up the M thing in that type of thing again, and from that type thing, the M is a 4 modifier on page 8 type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, there's an 18 type thing here. I'm going to try to throw that sheet up type thing in between it, but that's a +4 modifier. So now the P returns to being, in that type of sense, a 4 type thing, and that means type thing in that type of sense. The 17 points that you created at the beginning type thing is a 4 now type thing, or the score with an 18 is a 4 type thing, or the modifier is a 4 type thing, which it starts with an M, that's a modifier, and that's a 4 type thing, and that means. Very complicated type thing in that type of sense. Falls right into place type thing, in that type of thing. Now let's put this in the right order. The P is first type thing in that type of sense. And that's 17 points type thing in that type of sense. Here, just like a Soul Train or something. That's 17 points for that type thing. The score created type thing was an 18, and the 18 type thing has a modifier of 4 type thing, and that means straightforward 1, 2, 3. And in that type of thing, there's nothing to fight, there's nothing to worry about type thing in that type of sense. There's no confusion or anything like that in that type of thing. Now in that type of thing, there's a 2 ability point increase on the score, where 18 plus 2 type thing is 20, and 20 has a 4 modifier type thing. You have to relook it up back on page 8 type thing. It's a 5 modifier type thing in that type of sense. Now you can take this 2 out type thing and adjust this 18 to 20. And now you spent 17 points type thing to get a 20, which wasn't possible on that sheet type thing, to end up with a 5 modifier. This 5 type thing is going to become histogram raised. That's the one that's going to be used in most of all your calculations type thing from here on out. Very, very confusing. If it was hit points or difficulty class type thing in that type of sense, or a dex range modifier when you're shooting type thing, it'd be with this +5 in that type of thing in that type of sense. That's way too complicated. We're not going to get to that immediately in that type of sense. But that essentially is what's going on. We take this 20 type thing in that time here, and in that type of thing, that's an intelligence type thing. Boom. Now in that type of thing, with 15 points remaining, we had 32 type thing in that type of sense, minus 17 for 15 type thing. That now in that type of thing is going to move all that type thing, which is not complicated type thing in that type of sense. It really isn't. But in each step, you can fight it, 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 you can fight it type thing in that type of sense. But in that fighting type thing, you made something that was 1, 2, 3 type thing turn into at least 27 steps. And there was no reason for that type thing in that type of sense. Fighting things is what makes things of effort type thing in that type of sense. And once you see it type thing in that type of sense, it really isn't. Now that's 27, 7, and 7 type thing in that type of sense. You have a 20 intelligence, your wisdom is 7, your charisma is 7, your strength is 7 type thing in that type of sense. We're not done with the point system yet. We don't have to worry about the M type thing in that type of sense. That's the modifier type thing, and that's not on that sheet type thing. Even though both of them have 2 columns type thing, or 2 rows for some of the rest of everybody else type thing in that type of sense, those tables do not have the exact same 2 rows type thing. Just put that out of your mind for right now. And you're just creating a table within a table that doesn't exist. So in that type of thing, in that type of sense, that's here type thing. Part of this will be used on the next table type thing in that type of sense, but not all of it. You will not be taking that points one with you type thing. You'll just be taking the score with you type thing. You'll leave that whole point thing behind. The numbers in that point table type thing will also be left behind. They have no relation type thing to the next table type thing in that sense. It's a new second column. And it's track record off type thing, and it's creating a war, Fool's War within a Fool's War type thing in that type of sense, or Inception type thing. So now within that type thing, that's dexterity and constitution type thing in that type of sense, and we've got 15 points remaining. Now in that type of thing, we're going to spend a 16 type thing, and that's for 10 points type thing in that type of sense. So now I'm going to put 16 in my dexterity. That goes into my ranged touch attacks, which is going to give me, every time I throw range type thing on a touch attack type thing in that type of sense, you spent your life saying these things at once type thing in that type of sense. And to do this type thing is a little weird type thing in that type of sense, but then at the same time, it's not that weird. It really isn't. In that type of thing, there's touch type thing in that type of sense, and that's a touch attack goes against their touch armor class, and that's a roll of a d20 type thing in that type of sense. So it's the range one technically type thing. Now in that type of thing, the range one has at the end of its equation type thing a dex modifier in it type thing in that type of sense. 16 dex type thing has a +3 modifier in it type thing. So range acts on the 20 type thing. You have a d20 +3 versus their touch attack type thing in that type of sense. Very, very complicated type thing. And every time you roll a touch of class type thing in that type of sense, the first roll type thing, you do it once, it's a d20 +3. The second time you roll it, it only works with the first one type thing because it's a spell in that type of thing for your dex modifier, so it's just a d20 type thing in that type of sense. Or in that type of thing, it's naked by itself type thing. No. Your dex comes with the second roll type thing in that type of sense, and that applies type thing with the touch 20 type thing in that type of sense, and the second one's a d20 type thing in that type of sense. So the first one was a d20 +3, and the second one's a d20 +3. It maintains itself type thing in that type of sense. You can always hit 23 touch type thing in that type of sense. Very, very complicated. Very, 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 very complicated. And so in that type of sense, that's the second roll type thing, and that's the first roll. Since that was the second roll can be represented by the number second equals 1 type thing in that type of sense. And that's right type thing, and that means. So now in that type of thing, that's second type thing in that type of sense on the list. And from that second, we're going to put the number 1 over it type thing in that type of sense because that represents the number second type thing. So you match the number type thing with the word, and that's 2 type thing. This was the first one type thing, 1, and the second one of 2 type thing, d20 +3 and d20 +3 type thing in that type of sense. And that's also very complicated type thing. So now that was dexterity type thing. We move that over type thing in that type of sense, and we're going to take this type thing, and we made that a 16, and we're going green on it, and that type of thing. Kind of need a different color type thing, and that's 16 type thing in that type of sense, and that's intelligence of 20, and then a dexterity of 16 type thing in that type of sense. Do not worry about the modifier. Now the points to create that was 10. The modifier was 3 type thing. It's 7 off type thing. So 13, 3 divided by 3, 3 1/3 or something like that. 3 2/3. You know, just fight that out a little bit later. Yeah. So in that type of thing, that's strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. We spent 10 on that. 15 minus 10 type thing is 5 type thing in that type of sense. Probably should double check it type thing. That's 15 minus 10 type thing in that type of sense. That's 5. 5 points remaining type thing. Go back to the points chart. 5 in that type of sense gets you a 14 score type thing in that type of sense. Like a reverse L Knight type thing in that type of sense. And I need another color to represent that type thing. I'm not sure how gray readable that would be type thing in that type of sense. That's seems like it's been minusing out type thing in that type of thing. And that's 15 type thing. I think I used to have a blue one. Still in there? No. Yeah. Okay, and that type of thing. And that's sort of holy type thing in that type of sense. I guess dexterity could be air-like too type thing. And that's 15. Should be blood red type thing in that type of thing for all the literalness of it type thing in that type of sense. Or steel blue type thing for knight. Knights are made out of constitution or of strength. And in that type of thing, in that type of sense, that's constitution. Now, we spent 5 points type thing in that type of sense for a 14. So this shouldn't be 15. This should be a 14 type thing in that type of sense. And that's your ability type thing. Very scary type thing in that type of sense. Now we get a character sheet type thing, that type of thing, and we follow the steps type thing in our book, which we don't have. And it says to assign the abilities type thing, and that means now we take that out of the character sheet and we write the ones, the 17, the 13, the 10s, the 7 and 5s type thing on the character sheet type thing, that type of sense. That's right. But those numbers have nothing to do with the character sheet. So now in that type of sense, that's a 7 strength type thing here. That's a dexterity of 16. Hold on here. Now I used to have erasable ink type thing. I should probably go double check whether or not I have any erasable ink, because this is about to be on. And that doesn't erase anything type thing in that type of sense. I'm going to go look for some black ink real quick, or blue ink type thing that's erasable. And that's key. Sense. I'm not sure if they make these anymore. It's anything that means. I hope they do. Alright, now on that type of thing, I think I'm going to change out one of my character sheets for it type thing here. And once again, that's the buildup of wrongness type thing in that type of sense. Okay, now in that type of thing, that's here type thing, and I'm going to change this sheet out type thing here for here. And we're going to rock and roll on that type thing. Now, in that type of thing, this is 7 here, if this isn't dead, which it is. And let's try this one type thing. And that's dexterity of 16 type thing. That's also dead. And a constitution of 14 in that type of thing. And an intelligence of 20. And in that type of sense, a wisdom of 7. And a charisma of 7 type thing, that type of sense. Now we turn back to page 8 type thing. We disregard the points there on that page type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, that 18 or 20 type thing in that type of sense has 20 or 18 type thing to follow up on it type thing that means. Now that's page 8, 20 to 21 type thing score, which is the first column type thing or row. And that's a column type thing. And that's the first row or column type thing next to it type thing in that type of sense. And that's the second type thing, 2021 plus 5 modifier. So now in that type of thing, we put a plus 5 modifier in with the intelligence type thing, 20 and plus 5. Very complicated. 16 type thing in that type of sense was a plus 3 type thing in that type of sense. And a 14 con has a plus 2 hit points type thing in that type of sense. So we write plus 2, and we fill that out type thing. And a 7 has a minus 2 modifier on it, despite its score spin type thing. And that's minus 2, and that's minus 2, and that's minus 2 type thing in that type of sense. And now you have a completed attribute ability assignment type thing that isn't confused with some other type of untemporary thing that's not going on. Now, in that means type thing in that type of sense, that's, let's see, Sayata, boom type thing in that type of sense. And that's cool type thing that means. And now you're on the way to building a character type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that, Constitution says you apply your character's Constitution modifier. Whoops, I'm on page 9. Constitution represents your character's health and stamina. Constitution bonus increases the character's hit points, so the ability is important for all classes. You apply your character's Constitution modifier to each roll of a hit die. So out of 20 levels type thing in that type of sense, you turn to page 22 type thing that means. And you do it for first, but at second level or third or fourth, you don't have a hit die roll, or fifth or sixth or seventh or eighth or 9th or 10th or 11th or 12th or 13th or 14th or 15th or 16th and 17th or 18th or 19th or 20th type thing. Each one of those has a D4 in it type thing in that type of sense. Now, if it's a negative modifier, you still have to subtract at each level of those type thing in that type of sense. There is no general person's agreement for it to go to 0 type thing. Now, that's a backpack type thing in that type of sense on page 23, which it isn't. Next to that backpack, you've got brown and white rows type thing in that type of sense. It says D4 sorcerer, comma wizard, and underneath it, a character rolls one hit die each time he or she gains a new level, then applies any constitution modifiers to the roll and adds the result to his or her character point total. Thus, the character has the same number of hit dice as levels. For his or her first hit die, a first level character gets the maximum hit points rather than rolling. Now, the maximum on D4, if you're a Duke type thing, it's 4. If you're a Shoe Cobbler, it's 4 type thing in that type of sense. But we try to make it like it's 1 type thing in that type of sense. That's 1 type thing. That's maximum for other people type thing. 2 is not maximum. 3 is not maximum. The maximum number on a D4 type thing is 3. For like other caste systems type thing, it's 4. It really is 4 type thing in that type of sense. No matter your caste system, your maximum on a D4 tetrahedral type thing should be 4. So in that type of thing, that's 4 type thing in that type of sense, and that's 4 at the top. And now, thus a character has the same number of hit dice. For his or her first character, a first level character gets the maximum hit points rather than rolling. So we gave them max type thing, but they should roll it. They roll it type thing, that's 4. And they roll that type thing, roll the 1 type thing, they get 1 type thing in that type of sense. It says that they get maximum, so that is maximum for themselves out of their roll, so that is 1 type thing in that type of sense. It's max on the die. Max on the die for that person is also still 1. Yeah. And that's right. For his or her first hit die, a first level character gets the maximum hit points rather than rolling type thing in that type of sense. But because they're not of the Glee Club in that type of sense, the Glee Club of a freshman type thing is not in that type of thing, is 2 or is 3 type thing in that type of sense, and that's the maximum size that they can do out of that tetrahedral type thing, which is 4. So in that type of thing, their maximum out of that type of thing is 4, no matter their class. If they're a freshman in high school or a sophomore in high school or a junior or a senior in high school, the max roll out of that is 4 type thing in that type of sense. Now, for his or her first hit die character type thing in that type of sense, and that's not right type thing in that type of sense. And that has a lot of issues type thing. So now that sophomore type thing, which there is no such thing as a sophomore in high school, junior prom and senior prom, and that senior type thing in that type of sense, a senior gets 4 type thing, but a sophomore is 2 behind type thing in that type of sense, so they get 2. That's the maximum side out of their caste system type thing in that type of sense, of class if you're in high school type thing. But in that type of sense, it said the maximum of what a sophomore can do out of that die. A tetrahedral to a sophomore has only got 2 sides to it type thing. A tetrahedral doesn't care if you're a senior or a sophomore type thing. It still has 4 sides type thing in that type of sense. So the max tetrahedral that comes to a sophomore, despite the fact that they are a sophomore, is 4. And it's 2 type thing because the sophomore, as soon as it hits sophomore, it morphs itself to a 2 type thing in that type of sense, and it's only a 2-sided tetrahedral type thing when it gets to them type thing in that type of sense, or whatever a pyramid is, only has 2 sides in a sophomore's hands type thing in that type of sense. That's the max that they do, but they've got a con bonus type thing in that type of sense. If you're a freshman, a pyramid answer in geometry class should still be 1. And so, because it's your first year in school type thing, a pyramid answer type thing for a freshman is 4. So that 4 is the 4 type thing in that type of sense. It's 4. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's a 4-sided pyramid. That's all that matters type thing. So in that type of thing, that's 4 type thing in that type of sense. And that's 4 type thing in that type of thing. Now we return back to it. First level character gets the maximum hit points rather than rolling, although constitution modifiers, positive or negative, still apply. So if you have a -2 modifier type thing in that type of sense going into it type thing, then in that type of thing you take out a percentile die and you turn that into a 0 type thing in that type of sense. And then you take another percentile die and you put a 5 in front of it type thing, and that's 5.0 type thing. That's 50 or 50%. And that's a very complicated type thing. But now the -2 turns into a 0 type thing and it still stays at 4. That's not what that said. That said in that type of sense that that's 4, and then you have to put that 4 with adding in that type of thing. That's not a double negative type thing in that type of sense. And you're going to add into your 4 type thing in that type of sense a -2 hit points type thing, and that means. like that. So I'm going to add a -2 hit points type thing. The minus is going to overrate the positive type thing in that type of sense. And in that type thing, that's going to be 4 minus 2 type thing for 2. So you won't have 4 hit points at first level. You'll have 2 hit points at first level type thing in that type of sense. There is no agreement on it type thing in that means. And that's what's going on. Not very complicated type thing in that type of sense. But now here type thing, we had 4 type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, we weren't adding a negative number type thing for our modifier in our constitution. Our constitution is a +2. So we're going to add type thing a plus type thing in that type of sense of a 14 constitution type thing in that type of sense, which is 2. And so that's going to be 4 plus a +2 type thing in that type of sense. And that's 4 plus 2 type thing in that type of sense. And in that, that's 4 plus 2 type thing, and that's 6. So now you have 6 hit points at first level type thing. Now in that type of thing, that's each roll of the hit die type thing in that type of sense. And with that type of thing, that's a 2 constitution modifier, and that costs, a constitution modifier goes with each roll of the hit die, and that costs 1 level type thing in that type of sense. And then the D4 costs 1 level type thing in that sense, type thing in that type of sense. That's 1 and 1, that's second level type thing in that type of sense. So that's 0 experience, and then 1,000 experience type thing, which has been handed out by the challenge rating, and that's second level type thing in that means type thing in that type of sense. So it's just the 4. So now back to constitution type thing, you apply your constitution modifier to each roll of a hit die type thing. That's your first hit die, and you apply your constitution to it type thing. When you apply your constitution, you have to level to apply the constitution to that 4 type thing in that type of sense. They're simpatico type thing in that type of sense, and they come in link type thing with the 1 type thing in that type of sense. So you have 6 hit points at first level. So now that's 4 type thing in that type of sense, and you have that type thing. That's a 4, and in that means, and you're going to join the 4 type thing with your hit points or your 2 constitution modifier type thing, and in a number line type thing in that type of sense, that is in that type of thing, that's here, in that means type thing in that type of sense, and that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, going to go up to another spot type thing, that's a first step type thing there. So a step from 1 type thing from 4 is to 4 type thing, and that's to 5 type thing in that type of sense. I'm going to take a second step from 4 type thing in that type of sense, and that's to 5, and that's to 6 type thing in that type of sense. So adding 2 to 4 type thing in that type of sense is 4 plus 2 is 6. So now that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4 type thing. I'm going to take my first step type thing from 4 type thing in that type of sense, and 4 plus 1 is 4 type thing in that means type thing in that type of sense. And that's right. So now in that type of thing, that's 4 plus 1 type thing is 4 type thing in that type of sense. And now I'm going to take another 1 step away from that type thing. I'm going to add another 1 to this one type thing in that type of sense for 2 1s. And that's also still 5 type thing in that type of sense. So in that type of thing, that's what that is type thing in that type of sense. And that's very complicated. So in that type of thing, that's here type thing, that's your hit points, and that's your ability points type thing in that type of sense. And from there, we'll try to tackle type thing in that type of sense, going into your spell selection type thing in that type of sense from that. Now in that type of thing, what you really shouldn't do type thing in that type of sense, that's sorcerer, that's wizard type thing, that's wizard, page 55, that's page 56 type thing, that's other classes, role, abilities, alignment, hit die, class skills, skill points, weapon armor, spells. A wizard casts arcane spells, the same type of spells available to sorcerers and bards, which are drawn from the Sorcerer Wizard spell list, page 192. A wizard must choose and prepare spells ahead of time, see below. To learn or prepare or cast a spell, the wizard must have an intelligence score equal to at least 10, plus a spell level, intelligence 10 for 0 level spells, intelligence 11 for first level spells. And that was complicated type thing in that type of sense. That's 1 type thing in that type of sense, plus a 10 type thing. That's a first level spell, plus 10 base type thing. That's 10 plus 1, which is 10 type thing in that type of sense. That's 10 plus 1 type thing in that type of sense, and that's 11. Very frightening type thing in that type of sense. So, and it said you need an intelligence 11 for first level spells. Once again, skill points at each level, weapon, armor, game and other classes, role, abilities, alignment, hit die, class skills, skill points at first, class features, weapons, spells, to spells and wizard cast arcane spells type thing. To learn or prepare or cast a spell, the wizard must have an intelligence score equal to at least 10 plus the spell level, intelligence 10 for 0 level spells, intelligence 10 for first level spells, and so forth. So now, in the back of the spell, it's listed as Sorcerer Wizard 2 type thing in that type of sense, and the spell level type thing of that type thing without caster level drops down from Sorcerer Wizard 2 right to spell level, and then you add 10 to it type thing, and it takes a 12 to cast that spell. Frightening type thing in that type of sense of its complexity. It's very complicated. Now the difficulty class for a saving throw in that type of sense, in that type of thing, that's a DC as an abbreviation type thing in that type of sense. Not really sure why. Now in that type of thing, that's here type thing, that's D, and then a space, difficulty, and then that's C in that type of thing, and LASS. That's class and difficulty, that's D and C at the beginning type thing in that type of sense. The acronym for the difficulty class is DC. And that's very complicated. And there's really nothing that can face that. That's like further transforms or something like that. Now, in that type of thing, that's difficulty class type thing for it. Now the difficulty class for a saving throw against a wizard spell is, now that's the first thing that we're going to mention type thing, in that type of thing, in that type of sense, and that's a base type thing in that type of sense. That's a base type thing, and in that, that's the first number type thing, and we're going to add that number type thing in that type of sense, plus the spell level. So now again, that's a spell level type thing. Base and spell level are the same thing type thing in that type of sense, and that's the second number in that type of thing in that type of sense. And from that type of thing in that type of sense, plus the wizard's intelligence modifier. Now, in that type of thing, the wizard's intelligence modifier type thing in that type of sense is the S and M thing in that type of sense, once again. S is the 20 type thing, so we put that in there. We're going to put 5 in there type thing in that type of sense. And that type thing, in that type of thing, that's the third thing mentioned type thing in that type of sense. So, in that type of thing, that's the 5 from this score type thing in that type of sense. And that's 5 type thing. That's 5. The base type thing in that type of sense was, no base was mentioned, is 10. So then that's 10 type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, the spell level, it's a second level spell in Scorching Ray type thing. Once again, we bring the 2 from that type thing, and that means. And in that type of thing, that's now 5 plus 2 plus 10 type thing in that type of sense. So it's 10 plus 2 type thing in that type of thing. That's equal to 12 plus 5 type thing. That's equal to 17. Now you write DC in front of that type of thing in that type of sense. And your DC is going to be equal to 17 type thing for your Scorching Ray. Very complicated. I mean, extremely complicated. Really challenges a lot type thing in that type of sense. Now in your character sheet, you go to your second page type thing in that type of sense. And that's spells per day. And that's the spell save DC type thing. Of course, Scorching Ray has no saving throw type thing. But if it did, it would have a 17 type thing in that type of sense. And now for your first level spell, it's also going to be a thing. So now you have Burning Hands type thing. Burning Hands is a first level spell, and which it isn't. It's like a third level spell type thing in that type of sense. And that's 1 plus your modifier type thing. And in that type of thing, that's 10 plus 1 type thing in that type of sense, plus 5 type thing in that type of sense, and that's 16. So now in that type of thing, that's 16 type thing, and 1 bigger for the other one type thing, and that's 17 type thing in that type of sense. And the other one type thing for here, for 0 type thing in that type of sense, which you can't represent. And in that type of thing, take a D10 and you flip it over to a 0 percentile type thing. And that's 10 plus 0 plus 5. And that's 10 plus 0, which is equal to 10, plus 5, which is equal to 15. So now that's 15, 16, and 17. That's Arcane Spell Failure, Spell Save, Spells, Spell Saves, Arcane Spell Failure. 15, 16, and 17 type thing in that type of sense. And if you're in your PHP, you can turn to the back and turn like 2 pages in type thing. You should see a character sheet ready for photocopy in the back. Now that's first, that's second, and that's a third ability type thing in that type of sense. And that's very complicated. All these things are extremely complicated. So now in that type of thing, that's here, that's the index type thing. You should see the index, which it isn't, 304, 300 type thing in that type of sense. And then you turn the page type thing, and that means, and that should be like 317 type thing. Then right after 317 is a character sheet. The second page has other possessions. You go to languages type thing. From languages to Arcane Spell Failure. Spell Save DC. That's the 15, the 16, and the 17 type thing in that type of sense. Right then and there. And that's really, really complicated type thing in that type of sense. And very complicated redoing that math formula type thing. So from that type thing, now you turn to Burning Hands type thing, that's a B. And in that type of thing, that's a B section type thing. That's Analyze Dreamer, that's Anti-Life Shell, that's Atonement type thing, that's Big Beast type thing, that type of sense. And we need BU, that's blade barrier type thing in that type of sense, which doesn't exist on page 205 type thing in that type of sense. And these things come together type thing in that means. Turn the page to 207 type thing in that type of sense. And that's burning hands type thing. Sorcerer, Wizard, 7 type thing in that type of sense. That's a 1. It's a first level spell. Which you cast back now. You go back to page 55 type thing in that type of sense. And from that type thing in that type of thing, that's not on that listing type thing in that type of sense, which it is. That's a Wizard class type thing. There's a 1 underneath first type thing on page 55 type thing. That's first level, 0 base attack bonus. Fort save, reflex save, will +2 type thing, which in that type of thing, that's just 2 total type thing. A save has a d20 in front of it type thing, which it doesn't type thing in that type of sense. Summon familiar, scribe scroll, 3 zeros type thing in that type of sense, and 1 first. Sorcerer Wizard first type thing in that type of sense, with 1 first type thing. The first and first does not match type thing in that type of sense, and then you can cast that type of thing, so you can do Burning Hands at first. And with Precocious Apprentice type thing, you can do the second one type thing in that type of sense. That's a spell level type thing in that type of sense. That's a first spell level. And the other one type thing in that type of sense is not a spell level. The Scorching Ray is not a spell, and it occurs at not a spell level type thing in that type of sense. That's cool. So that's spell level type thing in that type of sense, and that spell level type thing in that type of sense, and Scorching Ray occurs at second spell level type thing in that means. So that's first and second type thing in that type of sense, and that Scorching Ray type thing. And Scorching Ray is a second level spell, which occurs at second level spell level, I think, which it doesn't do in that type of thing. That Scorching Ray next to second type thing. Second is a first level spell level type thing in that type of sense. So that's first level spell level for Scorching Ray type thing in that type of sense. You take the 1 out type thing, you put the 2 next to spell level type thing in that type of sense. That's second spell level Scorching Ray type thing in that means type thing. It's a spell level type thing, which is your Burning Hands is a spell level. It was with 1 type thing in that type of sense. And each one of them does not get a bonus with it type thing in that means. Only one of them does type thing in that type of sense. Now that's Burning Hands type thing in that type of sense. And you add with your specialist type thing in that type of sense, if you have it, that's a spell level, you add 1 to it type thing. And the Scorching Ray type thing with the percentile type thing being with 0 type thing, adds nothing to it type thing in that type of sense. And there's nothing on that type of thing in that type of thing. That's the same spell level. Scorching Ray is the same spell level as Burning Hands type thing, as a first level character type thing, and that means so you've already added the bonus to it type thing, and it's 0, and it changes your Burning Hands into 0 type thing in that type of sense. So as a specialist type thing in that type of sense, you do 0 spells. So that's first and second type thing, and that's 1 type thing added to the 1 spell, but only one of these spell levels can get 1, your highest one. Your first level spell is the one that you can do that's higher than 2, and it's the president type thing. So it's in that type of thing. On chart, 0 first and second, and you can't do that. Precocious Apprentice is going to give you a second, which is going to be 0. So the highest one you can do is first, and it's the only one that gets the word bonus behind it type thing in that type of sense. So now in that type of thing, that's bonus for the first one type thing in that type of sense. And now that's another slip of paper. And I think I'm almost out of these type things in that type of sense. And that's bonus on 1 type thing in that type of sense. And 2 sets blank type thing in that type of sense. And so it said each level type thing in that type of sense is specialist type thing. So first level gets a bonus type thing. If you can cast your seconds, which you can, then second should get a bonus type thing. There should be 2 words of bonus there type thing in that means. And it isn't. It's just 1. So now, in that type of thing, there's a slip of paper, you clear all that out type thing in that type of sense. That's 1 for bonus type thing in that type of sense. And 2 type thing, that's 1 off of bonus type thing in that type of sense. And there's none for 2 in that type of thing. Each level means only your highest level type thing gets 1 type thing, which is your second type thing. And now your first level has no bonus on it type thing, and it goes blank type thing. It's not an each level thing type thing in that type of sense. The bonus on the first one is absorbed into the second one type thing in that type of sense. And there is no bonus for the first level type thing in that type of sense. So first level gets the word bonus behind it, and second level gets each type thing in that type of sense. It gets the word bonus behind it type thing. And now in that type of thing, that's 1 and 1 type thing in that type of sense. And from that type of thing, that's a bonus 1 here type thing where you're first. and a bonus 1 here for your second type thing in that means type thing in that type of sense. And you can cast a bonus with your second type thing in that type of sense, and then from there type thing in that type of sense, now your focus specialist adds another 2 to any level that you could do type thing in that type of sense. And that's here, that's 2, and that's here, that's 2 type thing in that type of thing. And now in that type of thing, that's 3. But your bonus from your first level spell type thing in that type of sense is your intelligence modifier, and nothing says that type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that type of thing, back to page 56 where we left off with the wizard intelligence modifier, then like other spellcasters, a wizard can cast only a certain number of spells each spell level per day. Her base daily spell allotment is given on table 318, the wizard. In addition, she receives bonus spells per day if she has a high intelligence score. See table 1.1 ability modifiers and bonus spells, page 8. So now, in that type of thing, you turn back to page 8 type thing in that type of sense. That's a 14 intelligence, but we've got a 20 to 21. That's 2 first level spells type thing. And we just got permission to cast a second level spell from dash type thing to the first type thing. So now we have to add 2 to that. That's 5 for the other one. And 3 plus 1 type thing in that type of sense, which is 3. So it's 3 plus 1 type thing in that type of sense, which is 3 type thing in that type of sense. So you have 5 first ones and 4 second ones type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that type of thing, you turn to page 181 type thing in that type of sense, the complete arcane, other precocious apprentice type thing in that type of sense, and it doesn't say that. Your master is showing you the basic with spell beyond the normal limits. It's on page 181 of the complete arcane type thing in that type of sense, which doesn't exist. Doesn't. Now, in that type of thing, it says wizard training or the arcane order type thing in that type of sense. And then it says precocious apprentice, which wouldn't be allowed. Your master has shown you the basic with spell beyond the normal limits of your experience and training. Spellcasting ability and intelligence of 15, and that type of thing. We have a 5 modifier, so that is an account type thing, on a 20 intelligence type thing in that type of sense, which is in that type of sense still just a 5 modifier. Arcane caster level first. We're wizard first type thing in that type of sense, but we only have, in that type of thing, that's S and M type thing. That's a 5 modifier type thing in that type of sense. So in that type of thing, which we don't have type thing in that means anymore, and that's in that type of thing, that's back to page 8. That's a 5 modifier score with a -3 modifier type thing in that type of sense. That's in the PHB type thing. That's a 20 to 21 with a +5 modifier. 5 jumps to the 20 type thing. So it's a 20 score type thing, which is bigger than 15, which means you can look at that feat, but you can't. And in that type of thing is a lot of confusion type thing in that type of sense, which it isn't that confused. Now, choose 1 second level spell from a school of magic type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that type of thing, you go back into the book type thing on page 192 or something like that in that type of sense. And from that type of thing, that's 191, that's 192 type thing in that type of sense. 0 level spells, first level spells, second level spells. Anything in this type thing stays second level until you bump into the 3rd level type thing in that type of sense. So now, that's the next page. 3rd level sorcerer is right in front of summon swarm, so summon swarm and web is a 3rd level spell type thing. That's a different row or column type thing in that type of sense, so it's still second. Second down into evocation type thing, that's scorching ray type thing. I'm going to choose through evocation scorching ray type thing, and that means. So now, that's a 2nd level spell type thing, and that means. Choose a 2nd level spell, which is scorching ray type thing, from the school of magic you have access to. You gain an extra 2nd level spell slot that must be used initially to cast only the chosen spell. Until your level is high enough to allow you to cast the 2nd level spells, you must succeed on a DC 8 caster level check to successfully cast the spell. If you fail, the spell is miscast to no effect. Your caster level with the chosen spell is your normal caster level, even if this level is insufficient to cast the spell under normal circumstances type thing in that type of sense, which is now the levels of the caster in that type of thing. When you become able to cast 2nd level spells, you lose the benefit described above, but retain the 2nd spell slot, which you can use to prepare or spontaneously cast a spell 2nd level or lower, as you would normally would. Finally, you gain a +2 bonus on spellcraft checks. You can take this feat only as a 1st level character, which is 2nd level character you can take type thing, or 1st level wizard as a 2nd level character type thing in that type of sense, which is still applicable. So in that type of sense, that's a 1st level character type thing in that type of sense. Now you turn back to complete mage type thing in that type of sense, and you can't stand up to that type thing either, but you didn't stand up for anything to begin with. So in that type of thing, from that type of thing, that's elemental companion type thing. That's focus specialist, that's wizard, that's first. You must be a specialist wizard. So now you've got to go read the specialist wizard type thing and find the spellcraft type thing in the same sense. Now, page 57, school specialization. A school is 1 to 8 groupings of spells, each defined by a common theme, such as illusion or necromancy, if desired. A wizard may specialize in one school of magic, see below. Specialization allows a wizard to cast extra spells from her chosen school, but she can then never learn to cast spells from some other schools, which is all other schools type thing. So now in that type of thing, that's 8 schools of magic minus 2 type thing, and that's 0 remaining type thing in that type of sense. But she then never learns to cast spells from some other schools. Essentially, the wizard gains exceptional mastery over a single school by neglecting the study of other schools. A specialist wizard can prepare 1 additional spell for a specialty school per spell level each day, taking that type of sense. The spell level that she's in, which is first type thing, that's the only level I could do type thing in that type of sense, plus the next level type thing of 2. 2 is the only level that you can do in that type of thing in that type of sense. So now that's page 57, and you've got to go back type thing in that type of sense, which is very complicated in that type of means. Now that's 192 type thing in that type of sense, and from that type thing, that's 193. That's a Scorching Ray. You go back to 192, first level Sorcerer Wizard. That's Abjuration, Conjuration, Divination, Enchantment, Evocation, Burning Hands is a second level spell type thing in that type of sense. That's a first and a second type thing. So you do Burning Hands here type thing in that type of sense, and you do Scorching Ray type thing in that type of sense. That's 1 and 2 type thing in that type of sense from that type thing. And only the Burning Hands is going to be the only one that gets a special bonus type thing in that type of sense type thing, and that means. So now you get Burning Hands type thing, and you could do 1 type thing, which is going to minus itself out, and you're going to get a bonus 1 type thing in that type of sense. And you're going to do Scorching Ray type thing in that type of sense, which isn't going to get a bonus 1 type thing in that type of sense, because it's not a separate spell. It's the same spell type thing in that type of sense. So only 1 on each one. There should be 1 on the Burning Hands, and then nothing on the Scorching Ray. There should be a 1 on the Scorching Ray, and 1 on the Burning Hands. That's 2 in that type of sense of complexity. Very complicated. Very, very complicated. Now that's a +4 spellcraft. You turn to page 178 type thing in that type of sense. 178. Spell selection, wizard spells, adding spells to wizard book, spells copied from another spell book type thing, or independent research type thing on 179. In that type of thing, wizard can also add a spell to her book whenever she encounters one, or a magic scroll, or another wizard spell book. No matter what the spell's source, the wizard must first decipher the magical writings, see arcane magical writings above. Next, she must spend a day studying the spell. At the end of the day, she must make a spellcraft check, DC 15 plus a spell level. So that's to make it type thing in that type of sense. That's a DC, that's difficulty class, that's 15 in that type of thing, in that type of sense, to learn it type thing. That's 15 plus 2, that's 17. A wizard who has specialized in a school of spell gains a +2 bonus on the spellcraft check if the new spell from her specialty school in that type of sense, which is rubbish type thing. Turn back here to your character type thing in that type of sense, in book type thing, in that type of thing. Now that's skill name, appraise, balance, bluff, climb. Go to the S's type thing, ride, search, sense motive, sleight of hand, spellcraft type thing in that type of sense. Intelligence, that's a modifier, plus ranks type thing, plus miscellaneous type thing in that type of sense. Turn back to page 61 type thing in that type of sense, and it doesn't matter type thing in that type of sense, because in that type of thing, at 61, skill summary, getting skills, using skills to make a skill check, roll a d20 type thing in that type of sense. That's a d20 type thing in that type of sense, plus your 4, plus your modifier ranks type thing in that type of sense, which the 4 in those things are your skill ranks type thing in that type of sense, which you haven't plugged in, so that's going to be a class level type thing of 1, plus 3 type thing in that type of sense, and that's 1 plus 3 is 4, 4 type thing in that type of sense. Now that's a 20 type thing in that type of thing. You have to go back to that type thing in that type of sense, which also doesn't matter type thing in that type of sense. In Wizard, that's skills of 2, plus that's 56 game information, hit die 4, skill points type thing, 2 plus intelligence modifier times 4 type thing. Intelligence modifier type thing in that type of sense is the 20 type thing in that type of sense. The modifier was the 5 type thing in that type of sense. That's 2 plus 5 type thing, and that's 7 times 4 type thing in that type of sense. That's 28 minus 4 type thing, and that's 0 remaining for 24 remaining. Very complicated type thing in that type of sense. And it's all a matter of things that cannot be done type thing. Now, in that type of thing, we haven't written that far down yet type thing. Of course, it was better to ask the question to show how everything was going to go to 1 or 0, or it's not going to be possible type thing, or only possible once type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that type of thing, you take your 4 ranks from your 28 type thing in that type of sense. That's an 8. And in that type of thing, you take another D10 type thing in that means type thing in that type of sense, which is also complicated type thing and bigger in that type of sense. Which is right. That's a 2 off of 1 D10 and an 8 from another type thing. That's 28. In that type of thing, we're going to take 4 off of that and leave 24 remaining type thing, which is still very complicated type thing in that type of sense. And that's going to give you 4 ranks off of that type of thing in that type of sense. That's a D20 roll plus the 4 ranks, which these 4 ranks are represented by the spellcraft type thing in that type of sense. Now, in that, Lid of the Rogue can walk quietly. A character's skill represents a variety of abilities. A character advances, getting skills. A character gets a base allotment of 2, 4, 6, or 8 skill points for each new level, depending on the class to which the level is added. If the character... That has nothing to do with spellcraft type thing. Spellcraft type thing in that type of sense is 4 spellcraft plus the 4 ranks plus the D20 roll type thing in that type of sense. That's page 61. And in that, using skills to make a skill check roll, that's a D20 type thing. That D20 now is 8. Plus the skill modifier type thing in that type of sense. Skill modifier equals skill rank. So now you write a D20 type thing on it type thing. Plus in that type of thing, that skill rank type thing, which is 4. Plus ability modifier type thing, which is your intelligence type thing, I believe, going into it type thing, which is 5 type thing in that type of sense. Plus miscellaneous modifier, the 2 spellcrafts type thing in that type of sense. And the 4 and the 5 and the 4 type thing aren't added on. They become into the 20 type thing, so that's 9 plus 4 type thing in that type of sense, which is 9. So that's 4 plus 5 type thing, that's 9, plus 4 type thing is 13. And that turns that type thing in that type of sense to a 13 type thing in that type of sense. So that's skill rank equals skill modifier of 13 type thing, plus that type thing, plus the D20. So the D20 is added to that type thing in that type of sense. And in that, that's 33 type thing at 33rd level type thing in that type of sense first. Now in that type of thing, turn back to page 179, which is complicated, and in that type of sense, still impossible type thing in that means. Now, spells copied from another spell book type thing, difficulty class type thing in that type of sense, is the success rate type thing in that type of sense. That's the versus type thing. That's the roll that you're trying to beat type thing. That's 15 plus 2, that's 17 versus a 33 possible type thing in that type of sense. So now, a wizard who has specialized in a school of magic gains a +2 bonus in a spellcraft check. If the new spell is from her specialty school, she cannot have learned any spells from her prohibited schools. If the check succeeds, which is 17 versus 33 type thing in that type of sense, so we take percentile type thing in that type of sense, and we make that 33 type thing as an end result type thing in that type of sense, and in that type of sense, that was a difficulty type thing in that type of sense of 17. The 17 is your success ratio type thing in that type of sense. So the 33 in that type of thing, that was 13 type thing added up type thing, plus the roll of a 20 type thing, as added to that, that's 33 type thing, turns back into a 17. So the difficulty in the thing was 17, which is a success rate type thing in that type of sense. The difficulty class type thing in that type of sense, go to the glossary type thing in that type of sense, and rounds type thing in that means. Now that's difficulties class type thing in that type of sense, that's page 307, which there's not a 307 in this book type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, difficulty class, a target number so it's a 17 to beat, and you had a 33 type thing, which beats the 17 type thing in that type of sense, and you turn back to page 179 type thing in that means type thing in that type of sense. So now from that type of thing in that type of sense, that is, if the check succeeds, the wizard understands the spell and can copy into your spell book, see writing a new spell into a spell book below. The process leaves a spell book that was copied from unharmed, but a spell successfully copied from a magic scroll disappears from the parchment. If the check fails, the wizard cannot understand or copy the spell. She cannot attempt to learn or copy that spell again until she gains another rank in spellcraft. A spell that was being copied from a scroll does not vanish from the scroll. In most cases, wizards charge a fee for the privilege of copying spells from their spell books. The fee is usually equal to the spell's level times 50 gold pieces, though many wizards jealously guard their higher spell levels type thing. Now, if you turn to page 129 type thing in that type of sense, which that doesn't say type thing in that means, now in that type of thing, there's spellcasting and services type thing in that type of sense. On page 29, there's a paragraph, thunderstone, clothing, food and drink, mount, transport, spellcasting and services, service, coach cap, hireling, messenger, road, ship, spell level 0, spell level first, caster level times 10 gold pieces for first level spell, which I think is the way that reads, but it probably doesn't type thing. Turn a page over to 129 type thing in that type of sense, then the 131 type thing that's transport, in that type of thing that's 132, in that saddle, saddle military, saddle pack, saddle riding, stabling, transport, carriage, cart, gallery, keelboat, longship, rowboat, sailing ship, sled, wagon, warship, spellcasting, and services. Sometimes the best solution for a problem is to hire someone else to take care of it. Since the characters are adventurous, such a solution should be the exception rather than the rule. But there will come times when the PCs prefer to pay someone else to handle something, whether that something is to deliver a message, cast a spell, or ferry them across the sea. Coach cab, hireling, messenger, road, ship specialist, spell, ship passage. The indicated amount is how much it costs to get a spellcaster to cast a spell for you. The cost assumes that you can go to the spellcaster and have the spell cast at his or her convenience, generally at least 24 hours later, so that the spellcaster has time to prepare the spell in question. If you want to bring the spellcaster somewhere to cast a spell, such as into a dungeon, if you want to bring the spellcaster somewhere to cast a spell, such as into a dungeon to cast knock on a secret door that you can't open, you'll need to negotiate with him or her, and the default answer is no. The cost given is for a spell with no cost for the material component or focus component and no XP cost. If the spells include that state thing, furthermore, if the spell has dangerous consequences, in addition, not every town or village has a spellcaster sufficient to cast a spell, and generally you must travel to a small town to be reasonably assured of finding a spellcaster capable of casting first level spells, a large town for second level spells. Because you must get an extra spellcaster to cast a spell for you, you can't rely on a neutral broker. Money is not always sufficient to get the spell cast. If the spellcaster is posed to you on religious, normal, or political grounds, you may not be able to get the spell you want for any price. The DM sets the final price of any spell casting you want to purchase type thing. In the case of spells that transport the casting characters over distance, you will likely have to pay for 2 casting spells, even if you aren't returning with the caster. Now, I'm hoping that type thing in that type of sense, like a DMG type thing in that type of means. You go into a DMG, which I don't own type thing, that's version 3.5 type thing in that type of sense, and in that type of thing, that's 281 type thing, or 280, which it doesn't have type thing in that type of sense. It only has 150 pages type thing to it. And from that type thing in that type of sense, you look up 281 type thing, you look in the back type thing, there should be a scroll thing in that type of sense, a scroll price type thing in that type of thing. That scroll price should match up with that price type thing rather than taking that type thing in that type of sense. Not really sure in that type of thing. Page 287, creating scrolls. And in that type of thing, scroll base price type thing for a first level spell is 25 gold pieces type thing. And for a second level spell of a cleric, druid, or wizard type thing, actually, I don't know what that is. So now in that type of thing, that's here type thing, in that type of thing, to create, in that type of sense, a scroll, a character needs a supply of choice of writing materials. Creator must have the prepared spells. Active writing, scribe and scroll requires 1 day each, 1,000 gold piece for the base price type thing. Caster level is class level price, and the scroll is made at the minimum caster. Character must pay the full cost of scribing each scroll type thing in that type of sense. So in that type of thing, I think that's druid or wizard type thing. You should be able to go into the treasure part type thing here, and in that type of thing, either multiply that out or find a first or second level spell type thing in that type of sense. And that's arcane, that second level arcane spell. That's in that type of thing, that's spectral, that's scorching ray on page 239. And in that type of thing, that's arcane, that's 0, that's first type thing in that type of sense. That's second, that's alphabetical, 81 and 82 is scorching ray. 150 gold pieces for another scorching ray on your character. You want it burning hands at first level type thing in that type of sense. And in that type of thing, that's first level arcane spells type thing. That's 0-3. That's 0 type thing in that type of sense. That's burning hands is 0-6, 0-7 type thing, and that's 25 gold pieces.